welcome to this week's book club edition of Empire's End, our weekly meetup where we're going to discuss this book a couple of chapters at a time. If you are unfamiliar with the series, you can go ahead and click up here and you will find playlists for Book 1 and Book 2 of the series if you want to get caught up with us as we continue along. But for now, we're going to just discuss the next couple of chapters from where we left off. We've just started the book. We did the first couple of chapters last week. This week we're discussing chapters 3, 4, and 5. So a really important thing here in chapter 3 that gets established, it may have been established in the previous chapter and I just missed it. I wouldn't rule that out. But it's important to note that Bones is on the ship. They had used Bones to threaten Mercutio Swift's mother, and his mother is on the planet of Corellia, but now here we have Bones not on Corellia. So unless there was a hyperspace jump involved that I missed, it seems that they never really threatened his mom. They just let him think that they were, which is not outside their wheelhouse. We saw them do stuff like that quite a bit in the first Aftermath book. That's kind of an important thing. I guess that they really weren't going to threaten a nice old lady. They had no qualms about letting him think that they were. So I'll leave that up to you guys to decide how you feel about that. With this is inevitably the issue with book 3s. And this is not a slam on the book itself. It's the nature of a beast when you're reading a book series like this, especially when the books come out a couple of months apart. Some of the stuff that happens, especially in this next chapter, but really over this next chunk, feels like territory we've already tread. Jazz and Cinder are going through stuff, and I feel like it's the same stuff I always say that Jazz and Cinder are going through, but I'm more inclined to forgive it at the beginning of a book, because inevitably what Wendig has to do is assume you have not reread Aftermath or Aftermath Life Debt before you've picked up Aftermath Empire's End, as the books are coming out several months apart. So this is kind of the recap, reorient ourselves with the characters in the event you've taken time in between the books. TV shows do it, movies do it, it's a part of storytelling. But I also think the way he does it kind of works as well. We saw at the end of Life Debt that both Jazz and Cinder had made great strides forward in their character, and then things happened and they reverted. And this is a very normal thing in Star Wars, but in fiction in general. We see it in the sequel trilogy. Leia talks about how she and Han went back to the only thing they ever knew. You know, Leia went back to generaling and Han went back to smuggling. And that's effectively what Jazz and Cinder have done here. It was just a much shorter amount of time before they eventually went back to such things. So Cinder is back to his, like, I threaten people, and I'm having an identity crisis about it, which is a really interesting identity crisis. I'm just ready to see it go to the next stage. I do think that them reverting at the end of the last book is a very interesting thing, because it's a painful thing. I saw these, they're the two characters that I care the most about in the book, I would say. Bones is my favorite character, but Bones also doesn't have a character arc. Bones doesn't need a character arc. Bones is Bones, right? These two, theirs are the character arcs I care about the most. So seeing them make such great strides and then go back is hard for me as a reader, but in the right way, right? I'm invested, and so I'm hurting the way I'm supposed to be watching them kind of revert. So a lot of this, too, is just my impatience of, like, guys, I want you to get your life together because I care a lot about you as characters. But Cinder and Jazz go back over their conversation of a man without a star, and Cinder says that maybe he does have a star, it's just not a place, that it's his torturing people, and that maybe he likes it, and he's trying to convince himself that it's something he likes. Jazz is not convinced that it actually is something he likes, because if it was something he likes, he wouldn't be having a crisis, which is a very, very good point. So basically they have this conversation, and what they're just hitting is that life is scary. There's so much going on, it's so overwhelming, so they're just reverting back to what they know because it's a safer place for them. What's interesting, though, is Jazz is having the same conversation. You know, she's like, I want to go back to the hard-boiled bounty hunter that doesn't care about anybody, doesn't have friends. She's still upset about her feelings for John, presumably. It's not mentioned in this chapter, but it's got to be there. But Jazz is also seeing Nora Nora go down these lines, and Nora become like her. And I think it's interesting because Jazz is so happy with being Jazz. Well, happy's not the right word. Jazz is so comfortable being Jazz, but so uncomfortable at seeing someone else become her. And not in a she needs to be special sort of way, but in a she really doesn't wish herself on anyone else, if that makes sense. And this chapter is really important for what's going to happen later on in this week's reading, just establishing Jazz and Nora and where they are in their relationship as characters and where they are in their own character arc and how they're going to kind of build into this almost like character cycle, which I'll get into in the next couple of chapters as we hit that point. This chapter then goes to a scene between Timon and Nora. What I think is most interesting is at this point, Timon seems to be the most adjusted character. Now, we're going to find out how much of that is just pent up stuff that he's keeping within, but Timon is not the one trying to really deny anything. Like, he's dealing with having watched his father almost kill himself, and he's dealing with having saved his father's life from that. But he's kind of the one that has to put the big boy pants on. You know, he's watching his mom freak out. You know, she's not being the adult in the room. She's running off, doing everything on her own, not consulting anyone. And then Jazz and Ginger, you know, he would recognize them as kind of going backwards too, and he has to step up. And this is a thing that young people do. It's not uncommon when you have a kid raised in a house that through some sort of tragic event or just the way life goes or because the parents aren't being good parents, it's not uncommon for kids to just kind of step up and be that parent in a way, mostly because they don't know what else to do, right? So they don't have the life experience to know how to handle something, so they just handle all the tangible things. And it's kind of this amazing and yet unfortunate thing that young people can do, and that's what I'm seeing in Timon right now. Is it's not that he's okay. I don't suspect that Timon is doing okay. I suspect that Timon is seeing everyone else be not okay, and he figures someone has to be okay, so it might as well be him. And that sense of purpose is what's making him stable right now. Now, he also hasn't been in this book a whole lot, and maybe in 3 chapters he's going to have a panic attack that I forgot about, and everything I just said is void, but that's how I'm reading his character right now in this conversation he's having with his mother. Where Timon is usually so snappy, so petty, so quick to get in an argument with his mom, and he's a solid character. He's this way around the people that he's mad at. And instead of seeing him revert to that with his mother again, he's just kind of like, get out of your shell. Like, let me help, don't leave me on the spaceship. But it wasn't just I'm being left out because I'm a kid. That was a part of it. But it's that plus you also need people. And it was a maturity in his character that has just seemed to kind of bloom out of nowhere. And again, that's where I suspect the kind of kid superpower is coming out in him. So chapter 4, we get to the planet of Jakku. They arrive on Jakku. You know, it's supposed to be this backwater world with nobody, and they find the entire Imperial fleet. Now, they knew that the Ravager exists. They knew that the spaceships exist. They knew that Sloane's fleet exists, but they had never seen all of the Empire together. And now all of the Empire is there on Jakku, and they have to get out of Dodge, because as soon as they're spotted, you know, they can't, where are they gonna go? You know, there's all these Star Destroyers, all these TIE fighters. So they have to fly and get out. But Nora recognizes this, but also recognizes that this is where Sloane is, and she doesn't want to lose Sloane. So Nora is doing that Nora thing, where she locks the ship where it is gonna go into hyperspace, and then she goes to jump into an escape pod. She doesn't really consult anyone. She literally just sets hyperspace and books it. And Timon is, again, kind of forced to be the adult here. Timon wants to run after his mom. He figures out what she's going to do. He wants to go. He wants to stay with her. But someone's got to pilot the ship, and she left him there. So he's like, I want to go and be irrational. And of anyone in the crew, surely the teenager has the one with the most right to be irrational. But here we see him being the one to pilot the ship and get the crew out of there. Who ends up going with Nora is Jazz. And as I said, they've kind of been set up to be foils earlier. In that kind of character cycle that I was talking about, is that Nora is kind of becoming Jazz. She's becoming that hardened, I'm doing everything on my own human emotion is too, or sentient connection is too much. I don't want to have that. And Jazz doesn't want to admit it, but Jazz ultimately would want to be more like Nora. You know, she was having these feelings for another person, and maybe she would want to settle down and have a kid and, like, have the picket fence life, but she wants a life with more connections. She just can't admit to it, and Nora wants to leave those behind. So they're being set up as these foils that are kind of, one is turning into the other and wants to, and one is kind of turning into the other and doesn't want to. And how they kind of play off of each other is going to become interesting going forward. Bones goes along with them. They just don't know this yet. Bones goes along in a second escape pod. So that'll become a thing as Bones searches for them and how that storyline goes. And then Timon gets out of the planet's atmosphere and starts flying back to Chandrila. So at this point, it's literally like Timon and Singer. And then the other three are on Jakku, and the crew's effectively split, and this is where we go from there. We have Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is Nora and Jazz landing on the surface. Jazz is mad. Like, she is ticked off at Nora, and they have some words about what's going on. At this point, I almost gotta wonder, like, if Nora is suffering from some PTSD type things. I mean, she literally lands, and once she's there, she realizes what she's done. She realizes that she's just done the thing that Timon called her out for, that she went and did that thing where she does everything by herself and doesn't talk to anybody, and she kind of has these fits of, I have to go do a thing, I gotta panic, I gotta handle this, and then she figures out where she's at. So Nora is in some sort of really unhealthy mental state at this point, in my opinion. And I think that's something that Jazz recognizes, but doesn't necessarily know how to handle, because of course Jazz wouldn't do anything particularly healthy in that light either. Really, with Nora, I guess the reason why, me and my psychological wisdom, the reason why I say that with Nora is she actually reminds me a lot of Tony Stark in Iron Man 3. These kind of like manic, I have to do this and this and this and this and this and this, and if I do all of these things, then I can keep all of the things that I'm anxious about safe. And she's behaving a lot like that, rather than, basing it on any kind of actual research or anything remotely scholastic. That's where my comparison kind of comes from. But it's certainly a similar mental state between the two characters, I think. But anyway, with these chapters, what I'm really excited about is the setup of the parallel between Nora and Jazz as we go forward. That's all I have for you guys this week. I had talked to you guys a ways back and suggested that I might try to get a video ahead or whatever, but I'm going to tell you now that that's not going to happen. So next week, Monday, I will still be at Star Wars Celebration, so we are going to take a week off from this series. Obviously, if you're watching it later on, there may yet be another video, but I'm sorry, I'm going to tell you that we're going to take a break, just because that's just, it's just not going to happen. I tried, but it's not going to happen, I'm sorry. But for 2 weeks from now, do the interlude, chapters 6, 7, and 8. That's a fair number of pages and a little bit more than we usually talk about in one video, but since we're taking a week off, we can go a little bit further than usual. I don't think that would be so terrible. So that's what we will do in 2 weeks, and in 2 weeks we'll actually know some things about Star Wars Episode 9, which is pretty amazing. Thank you so much for being a part of this video series with me. Please leave me a comment on what you thought of the reading so far. Please make sure you're following us on all of the social medias. Consider joining our Discord, where we can talk about these books more in real time as we're reading them. And I will talk to you guys in 2 weeks.